Welcome to Ubit Solutions. This video is a part of the series regarding managing your finances using Excel. In the last video, part 2, we started designing our initial T accounts where a user can add as many as T account that they want. We linked these added account definitions to the 4 basic categories that comes from the basic accounting equation involving asset, liability, and equity definitions. By linking these user-defined accounts to the 4 basic categories, it helps us to auto-define the column signs. In other words, it helps to define whether the given account is a debit account or it is a credit account. And then we took the work to the next step and created a linked T account sheet where all these accounts that you see here are now linked to the design sheet definitions. So any addition to these accounts or deletion to any account from the design side will be auto reflected in the sheet. And then at the same time, we also define the columns, did their sum, and get the net sum ready for the trial balance. So in this particular video, we'll take this work to the next step and implement a trial balance sheet related to these accounts. Now, in case you want to go back and check the work done on the part 2, check the link on the top right hand side of your video or in the description below, and you can get up to the speed. So let's switch over to the Excel for this particular work. Basic trial balance sheet. I put some headings on it, and the whole idea would be we would do the total, all the debits and all the credits here for all the accounts, and then we just make sure we check it that the sum of all the debit entries are equal to sum of all the credit entries, which is what the means zero count is balanced. So before we do that, might be a good idea to just throw some transactions into our account just to make sure the numbers comes up, or maybe let's just add a few more account. Maybe let's add one. Let's just add a dividend account. We make it let's say 400 as an ID, and the dividend is an equity in the negative direction. So that's our basic. Let's go back into our T account. Let's copy paste some of the transactions here that we wanna make. There we go. So let's just say that we took a loan of, let me see. Okay, let's say we took a loan of $1,000. That means you took a loan on credit card, your loan increased, right? So that goes into the credit column. You took a loan of $1,000. What did you do with it? You obviously go to the bank. So bank balance increase, which would be the positive side here, 1,000. Or another way of looking at it is if for a twin entry system, if the first entry is in the credit column, the balancing entry has to be in the debit column. So that's another fundamental way of looking into it. All right, so then second entry, let's say you earned $1,500 using that loan money into a business, which means your bank account increased. At the same time, your income increased to $1,500. So this was a debit. Here it's going to go into the credit. So $1,500 into your credit, your income increased. Then let's say you paid off your loan of $500. So you paid off the loan. That means the bank, you took the money out of the bank. So bank out, but then the loan decreased, which means this was credit. Now the credit card would be a debit entry of $500. That makes sense. So then finally, well, you took some money out for dividend, $300 too. That means you took money out $300 from your bank, but your dividend increased. So this was a credit entry. The balancing would be a debit entry, which would be $300. All right. So just we threw some bunch of numbers so we can do some sum on our trial balance. First step, let's copy all the IDs of our accounts that are in the T accounts. In the design side, and that would be our. All right. So these are our T accounts, and we just copy the formula here. And let's get the account names, or instead of ID, you can just put account names. And while we're at it, let's get a debit and credit entries too. Debit, or C for credit. Let's say the debit side is same debit column, and that would be a credit column. Let's say just okay, and these are our calculation columns. So maybe just change the styling to something light color. Okay, and now what we want to do is we want to get our totals out from our T account, which is this row, and we will temporarily put it in this column, and let's just call it a calc, because we have to determine whether the sum goes to which column for our trial balance. So this one is nothing, simply X lookup. What are we looking up? We are looking up for D6. So that's our looking for ID. Where are we looking into? We are looking into this array, and we're gonna make it a reference. And when we match the ID, just give us the sum, which was the entry right below it, and F4 for our absolute reference. Close the bracket. All right, so that's a $1,700 from the first account goes into our trial balance calculation. Now we want to copy the same thing here. All you have to do is the first entry is put on positive, the number sign, that will automatically update it so that it's dynamic. More accounts added, this formula will be automatically go down. So these are our calculation values. I'm just going to change the coloring to something more that. So now what is the goal? So this amount has to go in either debit entry or in the credit entry, and what would be the rule for that? Like for example, the first account is a bank is a debit account, the D side is positive, and if amount is positive, then it's going to go into the debit side. But had the amount been negative, let's say you went into overdraft, then it's going to go into the credit side. So how do we put side in a formula? All we can do is we can use this column and multiply it by the debit column, and if the answer is positive, entry goes here, and do the opposite if the entry is not positive, or you can say multiplying your calculation with the credit side, and if the number is positive on the credit side, then it goes on the credit side. So there's many ways. I mean, you can, there's more than one way of doing this method. I'm just picking one. And so how do I determine that? Now, both are dynamic arrays. When you multiply the dynamic array, you can use the map function. Remember, mapping function can be used on multiple arrays. But remember, number of arrays you pick in your mapping function, then the lambda functions need to have that many parameters. So far in the past, we used just using mapping function in a single array, but this time let's do the mapping on a multiple arrays. What's our first array? First array, let's call it calc. The first is a calc array, pound sign. And what's the second array? In this case, let's call it a debit array, which is the debit array, right? Now you put the two arrays, now you have to put a lambda, and now lambda will have two parameters. The first is the calc, let's call it calc. And the second parameter was a debit. Let's just call it debit. I mean, you can name it any way you want. That's the beauty of the lambda. So now what would be the calculation? The calculation says if my calc multiplied by my debit entry, debit, is greater than 0, then just put calc multiply by debit. Otherwise, put 0. Sorry, 0. And let's close the if column. Let's close the lambda column, and let's close the map function. There we go. So it's automatically, it has updated that, and you can look at it. The 1700 was a positive number, and it's a debit account. It goes into the debit, and then other twos are negative, and then but the numbers are positive, so it's put 0 in there. Last 300 is also a debit account, dividend. So it goes into the debit. Now do the same thing in here. Same function, map, but this time this is our calc array, and this would be our debit array. Credit array, I'm sorry. That's a credit array. And lambda. Now we provide the two parameters. Let's call it calc and credit, right? And if condition, simple. Same condition, if calc multiply by credit is greater than 0, put calc multiply by credit. Otherwise, don't put 0. Close if statement, close lambda statement, close map statement. All right. So now you can see that these two 500 entries belongs to the credit side because that is the positive. Now what is the total? That's easy. Just do the sum and you just have to find the first character and then put a pound sign. That will automatically select the full array. That would be our debit side, and same thing goes in here. Maybe you can just copy it. Control. Sorry. There we go. So this is the sum of this entry, this is sum of these entries, and our check would be equal to if our debit side entry is equal to credit side entry, we are balanced, and we can also imprint the imbalance for our error checking. That would be debit minus entry. All right, so we save it. Now we can go back into our maybe say trial account here, and maybe we can just put is balanced, and then we can just copy our trial balance flag. That way when we enter entries we would know if this amount is true, and we can do some conditional formatting here saying okay, if it's equal to false, just make it red. Okay, so let's just throw one more thing. If we just enter 100 entry anywhere, which will create an imbalance, we know that we created an imbalance into our and also we want to check, let's say for example your bank has 1700. Let's say you end up paying yourself $1800 as dividend extra, which means your bank you took $1800 out, and your bank is negative 100, which means you went into overdraft. And we just want to make sure the statements are still balanced. And if you go back into the trial balance, you would see that even though the banking is a debit account, well, because the sum is in negative, that means it's going to go into the credit side, and then your statement is balanced, but you're in trouble. So that was just the just a check. Going back into the trial side, let me just remove that 1800 entry just in case. This was just to make sure our numbers are correct. Well, that brings us to the end of this video segment. In the next video, we will take this work to one step further and start implementing these transactions from the T accounts into journal and the ledger entries. And the approach remains the same. We will make sure all the ledger or the journal or the T accounts are related to the design sheet of this file, so you can add or remove at any account at your ease. And then you will soon see that you need way more information than just these two columns. I mean, date of the transaction, any account ID, any customer ID, or any custom message that you want to store. Then you would have that ability to do that, and that's absolutely required for this work to be used in any practical business purposes. The work that has been done so far, this Excel file is available for you to download and play with it. The link is in the description of this video. And last but not the least, all we humbly ask for that is please consider liking and subscribing to this channel. You will be helping us immensely in terms of spreading the word, and at the same time we will make sure that you remains updated regarding whenever the new video is posted. Thanks and good luck to your future journey in the financial world.